Woo, yay. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us at the Energy, Climate and Affordability Town Hall. We are going to start in a few minutes, so if you're here, just wait patiently. Okay, I'm going to do a little bit of logistics here. So Peter and Jack and Keith, if you're not speaking, you might want to put yourself on mute just to make sure that the sound is as good as possible. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Energy, Climate and Affordability Town Hall. We are really pleased to be doing this event. I would like to start with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are on the traditional territories of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. And this area that we call home is also home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. I want to say welcome to our Energy and Affordability Town Hall. And it's very timely for a few reasons. One, we've had the most beautiful winter that we've ever in Toronto. The weather that we're experiencing right now is the kind of weather that we should be experiencing in May. And while we enjoy it now, we also know that it is a deeply concerning extreme weather event because we are not doing enough to tackle climate action. And the second reason why this town hall is really pertinent and relevant now is because we are in an affordability crisis and our energy bills are going up. And I firmly believe that we can move forward on energy solutions that tackle our climate crisis at the same time. The purpose of this town hall is to find out more about the government's plans with their latest energy bill and what they're planning with our energy sector, what we're proposing instead, what experts are proposing instead, and what actions we can take together. And we have 5 guests that are available to answer your questions today. I'm going to introduce them now, and then they'll have more time to introduce themselves later on when they answer questions. We have MPP Peter Gibbons from Toronto-Danforth. We have Joyce McLean, an advocate for Terre, SCAN, and a former lead staff person at Toronto Hydro. We have Jack Gibbons, who's the chair of the Ontario Clean Air Alliance. We have Keith Brooks, who's a program director from Environmental Defence. And we have Sandy Shaw, who is the MPP for Hamilton Ancaster Dundas. It's great to have you all here. In terms of an agenda, we are going to start off with questions that have been pre-submitted by you when you registered. And then once we've gone through those questions, we will be taking questions that come in as this webinar proceeds. If you have a question, please post it on the chat. Right, Kirsten? Kirsten, that's what we'll do. We'll post it on the chat. We're going to collect them, and then we'll take them, and we'll have our guests answer those questions. Thank you. Okay, so let's just get straight to it. So the first question I have is for MPP Peter Gibbons, and the question is, what does the Conservatives' push for higher Enbridge rates mean for affordability, climate, and the energy transition?
Thanks very much for that question, Jess. In your opening remarks, you noted how unusual, unprecedented the weather is that we're dealing with here at the end of February, beginning of March. And I just want to note to people that there are now 54 wildfires burning in Alberta. Wildfire season started there around February 20th. There are 100 wildfires in British Columbia, pretty much all left over from last year. They were never actually fully put out. So we are dealing with unprecedented climate conditions, which are headed in a trajectory to consequences that will be irrevocable for us and will substantially change the way we live. Last year, the Ontario Energy Board, in an astounding turnabout, actually acted on their mandate to protect consumers and decided that a request from Enbridge Gas for several $billions to expand the natural gas system, and most particularly to expand to new houses, was not a reasonable ask. They recognized that the people who actually pay those Enbridge bills would be stuck with expenses very large, something like $300 over the next 4 years, depending on how you count, as high as $600 over the next 4 years, with little prospect that the pipes that are being put in the ground would actually be used for their full lifespan. That is profoundly problematic, not only for the pocketbooks of those who get stuck paying those bills, but also the viability of the energy system, being stuck with billions of dollars worth of infrastructure that, by most reckoning, is not actually going to be used 15, 20, 30 years from now. So that issue, that stand taken by the OEB, was really a stand for consumers and a stand for the environment. No one should be surprised that within approximately 12 hours, the Conservative Minister of Energy, Todd Smith, came out and said that he was going to reverse that decision, that the Ontario Energy Board was acting outside their mandate, or as he said it, outside their lane. Frankly, they were exactly acting within their mandate. They were doing exactly what they're instructed to do. And so we are now dealing with a bill, Bill 165, giving the government power to overturn that decision by the OEB, and frankly also to approve gas lines which the OEB would not approve because they are economically not viable. They were not in the public interest. And I'll just also note, just for icing on the cake, there are changes in the bill that suspend the regular rules of disclosure to the public and just allow the government to ram through whatever they want. Now, that's not a real change from their normal procedure, but suspending rules that generally apply to public decisions is quite startling. There will be an opportunity in April 8th and 9th, for the public to speak to the Committee on the Interior. I've sent a link to Madeline to post. Hopefully, I don't know exactly, Madeline, where it shows up, but take a look, folks, in chat or Q&A, and you should be able to find that link. Please register. You can be certain that Enbridge will be there with all their allies to try and make sure that your cost of living goes up while you pay to make the world hotter. So that, Jess, in a few words, is my summary of the situation.
Thank you very much, Peter. It has been very concerning to see the Conservatives, consistently talk about how, giving Enbridge $1 billion in subsidies is justifiable, which I find astonishing. My next question is to Keith Brooks. Keith Brooks is the program director at Environmental Defence. Keith, I just want to take a bit of a step back. So the Conservatives like to say, oh, we need to do this because we have an energy shortage, we have an electricity shortage, and this is necessary. Is this true? And where is this energy demand coming from? And what are our energy demands in the future? What are they going to be?
Thanks, Jess, and thanks for having me here tonight. It's partially true that there is going to be a shortfall or some increased demand of electricity for sure. This is something that, in fact, folks who've been watching the energy sector knew for a long time, because many of the nuclear power plants are undergoing refurbishment. The Pickering power plant was slated to be closed. Now they're talking about refurbishing that one too. But nonetheless, these things have to go down while they're refurbished. And then, as I think folks might remember, when this government came to power, they canceled 750 renewable power projects and then basically sat on their hands for 5 years and did absolutely nothing to procure any new energy at all. Now, in the last year, we've been bombarded by a rash of announcements, mostly all focused on new nuclear. Well, on small modular reactors, or so-called small modular reactors, which I don't think are going to be small nor very modular. And then now on a Pickering rebuild and things like that. And then now this push to build more gas plants, which we've been very engaged in, and actually finally now some talk about some more renewable power, which is a plan that has some problems still. Not that we don't like renewables, we very much do. It's just the way that the government is going about procuring them raises some questions about their sincerity there. But anyway, the shortage is basically of the government's own making because they canceled a bunch of projects and then did nothing for many years, did nothing to procure new power at all. And then we are increasing demand for electricity because one of the key climate strategies that we have is, in fact, to electrify everything that we can. Like we have to get off fossil fuels, and that means getting, our transportation, our cars, our buses, and things like that, get them electrified. It means electrifying home heating as well and moving away from a gas furnace to a heat pump. It also means electrifying some of our industries, electrifying the steel industry, for example. And all of those things are going to increase demand for electricity. And then also, of course, there's population growth happening in Ontario. So there is a real increase in demand of electricity. A critical point, though, is that we must make sure that that electricity supply is clean. Because it doesn't make sense for us to get off gas in our cars to power them with electricity that is actually generated from burning gas. So we really need to clean up the electricity supply. This increase in demand is expected, and our view is we need to move more quickly and more boldly into building more renewable generation as fast as we can.
Thanks for that, Keith. You're talking about new gas plants, and what comes to mind for me is also the gas plants that are also being expanded. I'd like to introduce Joyce McLean. She's from Terra-Scan and was formerly worked at Toronto Hydro. Joyce, thank you for being here. I'd love it if you could tell us a little bit about the Conservatives' plans for the Portland's gas plant. As a local resident, what changes are you seeing, and how do these changes affect you?
Oh, thank you very much, Jessica. So let me start by saying that this plant was built in 2000. It came online in 2009. And at the time when it was approved, there was also a plan to add a big solar array at the site of the Portland's gas plant, which is on Unwin Street, down near the brand new development in the Portland's area around the Don River. So that never happened, sadly. The plant was originally built as a peaker plant, which means that when the electricity demand was the highest,
I'm going to give Joyce a minute to join us again.
In the summer of 2023, it was running 21 hours a day. There was no notice given to the local community at all. The city council actually voted against any kind of expansion of that plant, but the province has ignored the municipal direction on this. And the plant is slated to be expanded from 550 megawatts to 600 megawatts with a contract that's in place until 2034. What we also know is that the greenhouse gases associated with this facility have increased the City of Toronto's greenhouse gas electricity related emissions by 10% in 1 year. Now, the last year we had data was 2021, but this is extremely significant. And for local residents, it's not just the greenhouse gases, but it's also all the air pollutants that come out of the top of that stack.
Joyce, clarify this a little bit for me. What are the negative health and environmental consequences of living near a gas plant?
Well, gas, when you burn gas, it's largely methane that is burned. Methane is a very significant greenhouse gas, but there are also nitrous oxides, which is a small forming compound. Mercury and carbon monoxide, all of which aren't healthy for anybody. Nobody wants to breathe in that stuff. And as Keith said earlier, we have other options. We can build renewables. In fact, at one point, Toronto Hydro was proposing an offshore wind farm, which would have been a significant and positive addition to our electricity supply in the province.
Thank you for that. It brings me to the next question, and this question is to Jack Gibbons from the Ontario Clean Air Alliance. It's good to see you here, Jack. The Conservatives in the legislature, we hear them say this again and again, that expanding into more gas plants is necessary because wind and solar are too fickle to meet demand, and some of the other technologies like energy storage, they're not good enough yet. Is that true? Sorry, are the Conservatives' arguments, are they factual?
Well, no, absolutely not. Renewables, wind and solar, they're variable sources of electricity, and so they must be combined with storage options. But when they're combined with storage options, they can provide us with low-cost power 24/7 at a much lower cost than building new peaker plants or building new nuclear reactors. And the good news is that Doug Ford is building a lot of new storage. He's contracting for 2,500 megawatts of large stationary battery storage plants. So that's a step in the right direction that will firm up renewables and make them 24/7 sources of supply. But there's also other good storage options that he's not pursuing that he should be pursuing. And the lowest cost and best storage option for wind and solar are Hydro-Quebec's giant water power reservoirs. According to an MIT study, they're our lowest cost storage options. They're already built. They're massive. The storage capacity of Quebec's reservoirs are 1.6 times greater than our total annual electricity consumption. So what we need to be doing is expanding our east-west transmission links so we can tap into Quebec's storage system even more than we can now. And another good storage option for us are the batteries in our electric vehicles. When electric vehicles are combined with bidirectional chargers, they can provide power back to the grid when it's needed. So we do have many good storage options, and when you combine wind and solar with storage, we can have reliable, firm supply of power at a much lower cost than gas or new nuclear.
Thank you for that. I want to go back to Peter. Bill 165, which is a bill that gives Enbridge the ability to have existing customers pay for their expansion of gas infrastructure. This is just the latest anti-environmental bill from the Conservatives. How would you categorize the Conservatives' track record on climate? What goals have they set for themselves, and what goals do you think that we should have instead?
You would think after 4 years I'd remember the mute button. In any event, as you're probably well aware, they rolled back the targets for emission reductions in Ontario when they were elected in 2018. So instead of the 50% reduction by 2030 that Ontario and jurisdictions around the world should be trying to reach, they've set a reduction of 30%, which is grossly inadequate to the scale of the threat that we are encountering. I want to say beyond that, though, I have very little faith that they'll actually meet that 30% reduction. When you actually poke into their activities, in many cases, they're not doing the things they said they do, or the things that they said they do were not based on actual studies, but really based on guesses. The Auditor General was pretty savage in her assessment of their plans. So a poor target, unlikely to be met. And frankly, with the other activities like the attack on the Greenbelt, you can see that this is a government that has no real interest in taking on the climate crisis.
That's my assessment too, quite honestly, having to sit and watch them every day. Okay, so Keith, my next question is for you, and we've heard a lot about what's not going right in terms of how we're changing our electricity grid. And this question is, what can we do to reverse the Conservatives' move to override the Ontario Energy Board's decision?
There is a lot of things that we can do. I want to just go and add one thing that I forgot to mention before about the gas, though, and also given the name of this town hall about energy and affordability. I think it's really important for everyone to understand that the decisions that are being made by the current provincial government aren't just irresponsible from an environmental perspective and aren't just worsening the climate crisis and Ontario's contribution to it, but they're going to cost you money. As Peter said, that OEB's decision was going to stop a subsidy that on every existing gas user pays to connect new homes to gas free of charge. And so what the OEB said is that we should remove this subsidy because that's going to save existing gas payers money. And it's going to save new homeowners money because a homeowner will be better off installing a heat pump instead of having a gas furnace, which is more expensive to operate. And then, of course, it's also going to worsen the climate crisis. So the OEB is an economic regulator. Its decision was driven not by the climate crisis, but purely by its mandate, which is to keep energy costs low for Ontarians. That the government now is intervening, setting energy rates, allowing this subsidy, which will be paid by every gas user, and saddling homeowners with higher costs is just egregious. I want to say, too, on the electricity front, when the government canceled those 750 renewable power projects, they said it was to save money, but it actually cost $230 million that we all pay as taxpayers. And now they're going ahead and trying to contract new gas plants that probably won't be able to operate because of incoming federal rules around clean electricity. And the government knew this when they were going ahead to build these gas plants. And so in order to encourage, though, gas plant developers to bring forward proposals, what they said was, if these federal rules come into place and you can't operate your gas plant after 2035, don't worry about it. We'll pay you anyway. So this is actually billions of dollars that the government is signing us up for to pay for gas plants that will not be able to operate. And so collectively, this attack on the environment, plus remember that they fought the carbon tax in court and lost. They've got rid of the cap and trade system, which now they're musing about maybe bringing back, which also took billions of dollars out of the provincial coffers. I mean, this has been a very expensive ideological battle against climate change that's costing all of us, whether we're a new homeowner, whether we're a gas user, a renter or owner, whether you're using electricity or everyone is paying, a taxpayer, whatever, we're all paying for this. So what can people do around this? I mean, there's lots of things we can do. One is, as I talked about, the federal government is bringing forward rules around clean electricity. I would encourage you to support them. I know this is a provincial forum here, but we need to contact federal MPs around clean electricity, tell them to stand firm against the Ontario provincial government and bring in these clean electricity rules that are going to force gas out of the system. And while you're at it, express your outrage to your MPP or the Minister of Energy if your MPP is not a member of government, and let them know that you don't really want your tax dollars or your rate dollars to go towards subsidizing gas plants that we know can't operate. Now, when it comes to the OEB decision and this Bill 165, there's a number of things. One thing is that Enbridge actually emailed every municipality in Ontario and asked those municipalities to pass motions and to get in touch with the energy minister and other people to say, we support the government in reversing the OEB decision. I mean, this is quite appalling from our perspective, and we have encouraged municipalities to pass motions instead to ask the government to support the OEB decision. And I know some municipalities have done that, and maybe Sandy's going to speak to the success in Hamilton, but that's not the only one. So, if you are in touch with a local councillor, you can get in touch with them and ask them to bring forward a motion to their city council to voice their opposition to the government's Bill 165 and their support for upholding the decision from the OEB, because it will save existing gas users money, because it will mean lower costs for new homeowners, and of course, progress on the climate crisis. And then finally, we've got some tools up on our website, so I encourage you to come to environmentaldefense.ca. we've got a tool up. I was looking for the link for it earlier, but we've got a tool that's what we call a click to call. So you can just kind of click with a click of a button. You can get connected to your MPP if they're a member of government, or you can maybe get a call into the Minister of Energy if your MPP is not a member of government, and you can speak to them, leave a message, tell them that you don't support their decision to reverse the OEB decision and cost everyone more money. I'll be looking for these actions. I'll try to throw them into the chat as the conversation goes on.
Keith, thank you so much for that excellent summary. For those, I've noticed that some people have put in questions into the question chat. I really appreciate that. We're going to get to some of them. I've also seen that some of the panelists have been answering the questions directly. That's great. Keep it up. I want to next go to Joyce. We've heard Keith provide a really nice summary of some of the things that we can do on a municipal level and what the provincial government could do or what the federal government can do. I want to speak about what individuals can do just in their own lives. What are effective things that homeowners can do to reduce their fossil fuel use and energy use? And, are there any options available for renters?
Okay, could somebody please put my video on? Thank you. Okay, so let's go back a few years. When Doug Ford was elected premier, he canceled all the programs that help people actually save money. And electricity reduction programs for consumers were all canceled, as were institutional programs to reduce power consumption. So let's have that as the back concept here. There are things you can do, but most of them cost you money to be able to get to the end goal, which is to reduce your consumption and to reduce greenhouse gases. But let me just give you a few examples, and then I'm going to come back to some low-income programs that are in fact available. I think that if you're a homeowner and you have the ability to pay, then you can make sure that you're buying Energy Star appliances, smart appliances, a smart thermostat that will allow you to govern your temperature in your home, especially at night. Turn it way down. You don't need it when you've got lots of nice cozy covers around you. And keep your air conditioner in the summer at about 24 degrees or more, and you will definitely see reductions in your electricity use, definitely. And if you don't have an air conditioner, fans work very effectively and are very low-cost electricity technology, if you want to call it that. The other thing that does exist now, there are some low-income programs. They are subject to your income, but there are some available through the Ontario Energy Board, through Enbridge, and I guess through the electricity providers in the province. But generally speaking, we did have a very robust energy efficiency and energy conservation program structure under the previous governments. And I think this is very worthy of campaign in and of itself, because the cheapest electron that you can produce is one that you don't produce, if you know what I'm saying. Like, you want to be able to save first before you have to generate more. So, and Angela has just said heat pumps. I know that they are a very good solution to reducing your gas furnace use if you have one, but the problem is that you're going to have to pay for those now, because you're going to have to pay for them yourself, because the federal program has just gone into hiatus. Hopefully that'll come back, but that's not clear. Those are just some examples. And of course, be a conservationist in your own home. Turn the lights off. Make sure that you're not, if you're going from one room to another, just simple-minded things like turning off your equipment, turning off your lights. It does add up.
Thank you for a summary of the programs that are available to people who want to take, practical steps in their own lives to reduce their energy use. After this town hall, we will be collecting some of the practical recommendations that people have had, political and personal, and sharing it with everyone who signed up to be a part of this webinar. I want to continue on this theme of what we can do. My next question is to the MPP Sandy Shaw. Sandy, we've already heard a little bit from Keith about the effectiveness of having municipalities speak up. Can you talk a little bit about what Hamilton City Council is doing advocacy-wise around challenging the gas expansion?
Absolutely. And I guess in the chat, I'd like to know if Hamilton has showed up at the House. How many folks are here from Hamilton? That would be good to know. I think I saw maybe Nancy Hurst and Don McLean and maybe Michelle Tom, but that would be good to know what Hamilton folks are here. But yes, absolutely. I want to start by saying, as you said, Jessica, we're in an affordability crisis. So it's shocking how quickly and how confidently this government, meddled, that this unprecedented political interference was really shocking. Maybe they're just overconfident, or maybe, the Enbridge lobby is so powerful that's an important question that we need to keep in the back of our minds, is how did this government act so quickly, as has been said. I would also like to say, in the legislature, when we were debating this, their cover is always housing. They always say, oh, it's about housing. We stole the Greenbelt because it was about housing. It's always about housing. And I note that they kept saying, and Peter, we would all have noted that they keep saying that, this is going to drive the cost of housing up, because these costs will be borne by new homeowners. So I think, we have to make sure that we hold them to account. Like, who's paying for this? Like, who actually is this going to cost? Not just financially, but as we've talked about, the impact on our environment. And I would also say, you're right, Keith, that when they canceled the cap and trade, it was billions of dollars of revenue that they forego. I guess I would like more information generally on their current emissions performance standard. So they have essentially, a carbon tax for industrial emitters, and I'm curious about that, because I believe in our new green democratic deal, part of our understanding, if we collect those revenues, we would ensure that those revenues were distributed in a way that helped people that would be most impacted by climate change. So I'm curious to know what we're going to do about asking the government, what are they doing with those billions of dollars? So that's not the question that you asked me, Jessica. You asked me, what's Hamilton doing? Hamilton's always up to something, always, always, always. And so I will say, and Peter, you would know that, right, being a Hamiltonian. So I would say, like, it's worth noting that 35 Ontario municipalities have passed resolutions calling for phase out of gas power by 2013. So that's a bunch of municipalities, and Hamilton was one of them. And then when this bill came forward so quickly, a councillor, his name is Craig Cassar, the great councillor Craig Cassar, tabled a motion that was passed unanimously. And if I can find the motion here, and I'll just really quickly read parts of it, which is, whereas residents are struggling with energy bill increases and need relief, whereas natural gas is no longer the cheapest way to heat homes because electric heat pumps are now much more efficient. And it's a long resolution. And then it ends in, therefore, be it resolved that the city of Hamilton expresses its support for the decision of the OEB to end the gas pipeline subsidy and requests that the Ontario government allow the decision to stand. So they passed this unanimously. It's an important motion. And I think that, as we said, that the pressure, if it's coming from federal, municipal, and from provincial, perhaps we can squeeze this government. And finally, I said finally, but this is finally, I did a press conference this morning with the Citizens Climate Lobby, and the journalists were surprisingly interested. Like, I was actually surprised that we got as many questions as we did. And I'd like to go back and hear what they said. But essentially, they asked, where's the outrage? Where's the outrage on this? And I said, who's to say there isn't outrage? There is outrage. And I think, but I actually sat with that and thought that, is there a way that we can make this, is this clear enough for average folks to understand? Peter, you did a really good job saying the government wants to raise your energy bills. I think it's important that to ensure that people understand how they've been, what is the word I want to say, set to the wolves by Enbridge and by this government, that they understand it in a hard-hitting 1, 2, 3 punch way. And I don't know how to do that, but I think that people should be more shocked by this than they are. I agree.
Thanks, Sandy. I believe once people understand that their energy bills are going to go up and they're not going to get anything for it, the rage is going to increase.
Exactly.
I want to continue. Yeah, I want to continue on this theme of what we can do, because we're hearing very, very useful strategies and tactics. My question is to Jack. Jack, what are some steps that you think people can take to really challenge this gas expansion?
Well, the gas expansion for electricity?
Correct.
Yes, so Doug Ford wants to ramp up the pollution and output of our gas plants by more than 300% by 2030 and by 700% by 2043. So we're definitely going in the wrong direction. He also wants to build 1,500 megawatts of new gas-fired capacity, of which 50 megawatts would be at the Portland's gas plant on the Toronto waterfront. And so that just doesn't make any sense. But to phase out gas power, we have to come up with a better alternative. And so what we're proposing is that Ontario should triple its wind and solar power by 2035. And if we were to do that, that would allow us to phase out our dirty gas-fired power plants. And it would also lower our electricity costs, because wind and solar can be built at less than half the cost of new gas-fired peaker plants and less than half the cost of new nuclear reactors. So that's what we're advocating for. We need to get the message out that we can phase out gas power by 2035 and lower our bills if we triple wind and solar. So we really have to expand wind and solar. And instead of having a gas plant on the Toronto waterfront, we should have wind turbines in Lake Ontario providing clean, low-cost power for the city of Toronto.
Thank you, Jack. And I also see Angela has put some take action links in the question part of the webinar, so people can look at that if they wish. I want to focus a little bit more on this solutions piece. Peter, back to you. An NDP government is formed in 2026 and you're the energy minister. That'd be so amazing. What's our plan for the energy grid?
Well, I'll just note what was in our Green New Democratic deal, which was very substantial investment in conservation and efficiency first, with a program to retrofit houses right across Ontario to dramatically reduce demand. If we're going to move away from gas and not at the same time spend many billions on new transmission lines and ramping up generation, the least expensive thing we can do is make sure that homes, well, frankly, are pretty close to net zero energy, and then ramp up renewables. Those are the lowest cost options before us, and that would be the focus of the plan that we've put out. And I'm assuming a plan that the next, hopefully, NDP government would carry forward.
Thanks for that, Peter. I want to move to the questions that people have put in the chat, and I'm going to ask a specific panelist to answer them. If you have something to add and I didn't get to you, then you can just raise your hand and say you have something to add, and I'll have you answer the question as well. So this is a really specific one. It's from Elizabeth Block. 5 years ago, I'm going to read it. 5 years ago, I signed up with Summit Energy. They said they wouldn't raise their rates, and Toronto Hydro would. Now they're trying hard to get me to sign up again. Their urgency makes me suspicious. Anyone know anything that would help me decide? And if no one knows, that's fine. We'll just move on to the next question.
Can I just say generally that I don't trust those energy marketers? The experience I've had in my riding is generally that people don't get a good deal out of them. They are not well regulated, if they're regulated at all. And so I would not go with Summit or any other vendor that was promising that they'd give you low cost or inflation resistant electricity. I just don't think it's there to be had.
Thanks for that, Peter. I'm going to move on to the next question. This is from Aaron Williams. I'm going to read it out. There have been considerable advancements in solar technology like solar glass, battery improvements, etc. Will Ontario pursue this in the near future? Keith or Jack or Joyce, any of you interested in taking that on? Okay, I see Jack's hand. Jack?
Well, yes, the Doug Ford government is planning to procure 5,000 megawatts of new renewable power over the next few years, and that will include solar as well as wind. So that's a step in the right direction. And if he follows through with that, that will increase our renewable capacity by about 30%. So it's a step in the right direction, but it's not nearly enough. As I said a few moments ago, we're advocating for tripling our wind and solar power because that's by 2035, because that's what we need to do if we want to phase out gas-fired power by 2035 and get to net zero by 2035, which Prime Minister Trudeau promised us that he would make happen right across Canada when he ran in the 2021 election.
Keith, did you have anything to add?
I'll just add, the question here gets to batteries as well, and we actually are building some batteries here in Ontario. We're going through a procurement around batteries. I think, unfortunately, there's some backlash to batteries in some communities, and I'll just share, like, from the perspective of environmental defense, these battery projects are something that we should largely support. Some of the projects, the developers aren't doing a good job of meeting with local stakeholders and landowners and whatnot. And I think that's a mistake on them. But just in general, battery technology is safe and it's a good backup for renewables. And in general, we should be supporting it. Yeah, I think it's just important that there's some fear mongering around batteries catching fire and stuff like that. But the battery technology is pretty robust and it's a good way to go. And also the IESO, the grid operator, offered some contracts to some gas plants and to some batteries to serve the same function, basically, to kind of be what they call capacity. So just to be there on standby, should they be called on. And I want to say the batteries were actually cheaper than the gas. So batteries are a real option against using peaker gas plants and some of these capacity things. So in general, are we getting the lowest cost backup? Like, Jack was talking about the hydro in Quebec. Maybe not, but in general, the batteries are a good way to shore up renewable power, and I think broadly speaking, you should find support.
Thanks for that, Keith. Joyce.
Yeah, thanks. I think also, while we're all focused on the minister and the Ministry of Energy, there are others. There are also the building standards and the Ministry of what's the word I'm looking for? The ministry that governs building standards is also part of this problem and thus the solution. Solar glass, for instance, could be mandated as a requirement in new buildings. And as we talk about trying to get to net zero with our new buildings and green standards and so on, the City of Toronto has a green standard for buildings. This is something that could be applied provincially and would definitely reduce building by building energy demand. And that's something very promising and something to look at.
Joyce, that's a really good point. I do follow the changes to the building code federally and provincially because I also see it as an opportunity for us to advocate for energy efficiency. It has been going below the radar, but it is a win-win if we're talking about reducing the need to produce a lot of electricity in the first place. Okay, so I'm going to move on. So I've got David Rappaport. So his question is, why would a municipality agree with the government? I'm not, you know what, Dave? I'm going to skip it because I'm not entirely sure what you mean. If you put some additional comments in, I'll go back to it, okay? Then I've got Boyd. So Boyd says, Ford got in with only 40% of the vote. Join the Charter for Fair Voting at this link. So Boyd's talking about electoral reform and the next election. What do we does anyone have a response around electoral reform and its pros and cons? I'm not seeing a lot of enthusiasm here. So folks can just they type their answer if they want. You can follow up. Okay, so let's see here. Oh, this is a nice one. Okay, this is from Kathleen House. And Kathleen House says, my understanding is that Toronto cannot say no to new gas plants, or is it just for expansion of existing plants? And I think what Kathleen is getting at here is that initially the Conservatives said that they wouldn't move forward with gas plant expansion or new plants in areas if the municipality said no. It looks like that it's getting a little bit complicated. Does anyone have a comment about that piece? I see Joyce. Joyce and then Jack. Joyce, you're on.
Yes, Atura Power, which is a subsidiary of Ontario Power Generation, which owns the Portland's plant, calls it an upgrade, not an expansion. So therefore, they have managed to weasel their way out of any kind of environmental assessment. And despite the local community in South Riverdale and the beaches area wanting an environmental assessment, so that's the way they did it. And the city did not want any new gas on the waterfront, but because it's so-called an upgrade, it didn't have any. It didn't curry any favor at the province.
See, Jack, I saw you. Do you want to respond?
Well, yes. Joyce has given us what Atura's excuse is. They claim there's a loophole for upgrades, but that loophole doesn't exist. Minister Todd Smith sent a directive to the IESO. It's published on the IESO's website. Minister Smith was very clear. For all new gas-fired generation capacity, to meet his overall target of 4,000 megawatts of new gas and new storage, you have to have municipal support. And you can read Minister Smith's letter. It's only 2 pages long, and there's no exemption for upgrades. And the City of Toronto Council has twice passed resolutions opposing the expansion of the Portland's gas plant. And unfortunately, Minister Smith is not respecting the wishes of Toronto City Council. When Kingston City Council said no to a new gas plant, he respected them. When Loyalist Township said no to a new gas plant, he respected them. When Mayor Patrick Brown and Brampton City Council said no to a new gas plant, he respected that decision. And when Thorold said no to a new gas plant, he respected that decision. But he doesn't respect the decision of the Toronto City Council, and that's just wrong. It's a double standard. There's no economic or environmental justification for it. So we need to hold into account, and we need to get the message out that he's breaking his promise to the City of Toronto, and we need to point out that there's a better solution. Instead of expanding a dirty gas-fired power plant when the world is on fire, we should be tripling wind and solar power. We should be investing in energy efficiency. We should be building windmills in Lake Ontario to power our great city, instead of ramping up a gas plant and sending Ontario dollars to Western Canada or to Pennsylvania to buy fracked gas.
It always shocks me that the Conservatives don't listen to Torontonians. It's very frustrating until we make them. This is a question from Patricia Warwick, and I think it's an excellent one. And the question is, do we have options for non-homeowners? And I believe Patricia might be talking about what steps individuals can take to lower their energy usage, or maybe advocate on a city, provincial, or federal level for rebates or some kind of initiatives or retrofits for renters. Does anyone have some policy recommendations or some practical options for Patricia? I see Peter's hand. We'll start with him.
Thanks very much for asking that question. Jess and I are introducing a bill tomorrow, Affordable Energy Act, that will actually put in place a system of installing distributed energy throughout Ontario, taking into account the needs and interests of tenants, allowing them to buy into distributed energy infrastructure so that they can actually participate in this wave that is going to be very critical in my mind to stopping the investment in gas. It's tougher when it comes to actually investing in a building, given that the tenants don't own that building or that house. But we've opened up an opportunity in that bill for negotiation between tenants and the owners of the house so that there could be investment in the long run in making those houses more energy efficient.
Thanks for that, Peter. Keith, Joyce, or Jack, do you have anything to add?
I'll just add that, whether you're a renter or a homeowner, the increased gas rates will affect you if you use gas to heat your home. Increased electricity rates because of paying for gas plants that can't operate will affect you, whether you own or where you rent, because you use electricity. And so this impacts all of us. And, political advocacy is, I think, the opportunity or the action that people can take is to contact elected officials and hold them responsible for doing this and show them that you are angry about this plan to increase rates and turn their backs on the climate crisis. It's unfortunate there's a split incentive, for landlords versus tenants, right? Tenants want, warm houses and low energy costs, but if the landlords aren't paying those costs, and then they just avoid doing the work. And I think we do need governments to hold landlords to account, to change the building code, to require more energy efficiency retrofits and things like that. But this government is not on the case around that. And I'd say, this is also similar to the OEB ruling. The OEB found that there's a split incentive here between the home builder and the home buyer, whereas the home builder would just go ahead and install gas because it's done free of charge, even though they saddle the future homeowner with higher costs and more carbon. And so we kind of need to deal with these issues around split incentives that exist for, when the person that owns the building or builds the building doesn't reap the benefits of actually reducing energy bills and reducing emissions, which is what the occupant actually achieves. But, political advocacy, contacting elected officials, that's open to everybody, no matter whether you own or rent.
Thank you, Keith. I want to get to a question that was put in the webinar chat. It's a very practical one. It's from David Hitchcock, and he says, how much would the OEB decision on removing the subsidy for new gas lines on average save a household with gas service on its annual bill? And how is that average saving calculated? Peter, this might be a question for you.
Well, I think both Keith and I could jump in on this. I have to say, by the way, that Environmental Defense has been doing amazing work at the OEB on the Enbridge decision. The calculation was that in order to meet the cost of connecting new homes to the gas system, it would cost $1 billion over the next 4 years. And there would be ongoing costs after that. But for the next 4 years, $1 billion. There are close to 4 million customers for Enbridge gas. The rough cost is a little less than $300 per customer over the 4 years. But I have to say their interest rates or their interest costs in there and profit in there. So we rounded off to $300 per customer over the next 4 years.
And if I could just add on that too, is that, a lot of the focus rightfully has been on reversing this decision around, installing gas in new homes. But this bill would actually reverse a number of decisions that the OEB has made and increase subsidies to Enbridge to expand new pipelines to other communities and undertake other capital projects, all of which will be paid for by ratepayers. And so the total cost of all of what's contemplated in the bill is $600 per household, though it's hard to break that down into how much it will cost per year.
Okay, thank you for that. All right, so we're getting near the end of the time here, and I'm a big fan of always ending on time. So I want to just have one final question, and then I'm going to summarize the next steps in the take action piece. And this is a question from Victoria Coffin. Victoria says, can you speak to the impacts on the economy if our electricity grid gets dirtier with gas plants? How much is industry focused on ways to reduce GHG emissions, maybe through locating in clean electricity jurisdictions? So moving to an area where the energy grid is cleaner. Are we seeing any of that, where industry is using their heft and their economic power to, green the grid, make the grid more energy efficient?
I think we are. I mean, And I think that's why, in fact, Ontario is actually going to be building some renewable power now, is that many corporations are committing to 100% renewable energy. And if they want to locate, in Ontario, then they want to be able to meet that need. And some are going to other jurisdictions like Quebec that actually is farther ahead on us, than us rather on that. I'd say the government is being tricky about it. They kind of have this clean energy credit system that they want to sell to corporations so that they can pretend that they're green when all they're doing is just basically buying the right to claim that they're green, because they own a share of green energy assets that actually all Ontarians already paid for. But yeah, I think the business community is there. There's more work to be done to push them to push the government further on this. I think that's one of the ways that we can get to this particular government, though, is to say that, I mean, this is what the future economy demands, and Ontario's got to meet that demand.
Thank you. Jack, oh, sorry, Peter.
Well, I'll be quick because I'm sure Jack has useful things to add to this as well. There's no doubt that companies want to be able to say that their products are as green as possible. And if they're in a jurisdiction where you have a carbon-free electricity grid, that is a huge bonus for them. That's part of the argument that was made for the building of the battery manufacturing plants in Ontario. But the other thing that people need to understand is that other jurisdictions are now looking at putting carbon tariffs on products coming from jurisdictions that don't have a clean economy. I don't fully understand it. I apologize. Others may be able to fill it in better. But Europe is looking at a carbon tariff for goods coming in from dirty jurisdictions. If you want to be able to sell into Europe, you're going to have a clean energy system.
Okay,
Yes,
Jack
and
and then Joyce, you got 1 minute each.
Yeah, I would just add, like what Keith and Peter said is true. And there's large companies like Ford and General Motors and Volkswagen that want 100% renewable power or 100% zero carbon power for their manufacturing plants. So Ontario's decision to ramp up dirty gas is making us a less attractive place for business investment. And, we should look at what Quebec's doing. Quebec is our next door neighbor, and they're planning to meet all of their future electricity needs by a combination of energy efficiencies, renewables, and storage. And that makes sense for Quebec. It's the cleanest option. It's the lowest cost option. And, Ontario should copy Quebec and focus on moving to a renewable energy future.
Joyce.
Yeah, I agree with Jack on that one. And just to add that any business that doesn't consider its waste products, and taking power that's nasty, dirty power coming into their facility, they certainly can't claim that any goods coming out of their manufacturing facility is clean, green, or whatever kind of label they want to put on it. So it's in all of our interests to move towards a cleaner and greener electricity grid. And let's hope that collectively we can get there.
Thank you for your time. I really appreciate understanding and learning more about the energy sector and having you share your expertise. And thank you to you, the participants who are listening. I really enjoyed reading the questions as well as the very active chat. This is the start of a conversation, not the end of it. I want to summarize some of the practical steps that our panelists have recommended that we can do to move toward a clean energy sector and a green energy sector. They range from contacting our federal MPPs, our federal MPs to advocate for clean electricity rules. Environmental Defence has take action tools on their website, which I believe they've also shared and we will share afterwards. It's been very effective for no to gas expansion motions passing through city councils. On a personal level, I have gotten the Conservatives to move on initiatives on transit by getting local city councils to support my plan or what we're advocating for. So I strongly recommend that. Bill 165, which is the bill that gives Enbridge that $1 billion gas subsidy, is moving through the House right now. If you have comments or ideas that you want Peter, Sandy, or I to share in the legislature, please email us directly. And there will also be an opportunity to speak in committee. And we will make sure to send that around so that you've got the opportunity to sign up, send your written comments, sign up to speak. I also appreciate Joyce and others giving some very practical summaries of what individuals could do in their own home to reduce their energy usage and move away from relying on gas power. And I'm sure that there are more. That is just a list, and we will send a more comprehensive list to all of you so that you can read in the comfort of your own home at your own time. Thank you very much. I hope you have a good evening, and I look forward to continue to organising with you to green our energy grid.